I'm in conversation with Rico Norwood, who offered this beautiful and important introduction to Isaac Julien's seminal film, Looking for Langston, at a recent showing of the film as part of the BFI Flair program.
Niggas be gay, bruh. It may be simple, may sound funny, may even be disrespectful to say, but in that reserved dark solo room, in the New York Public Library, in the Performing Arts of the Dorothy and Louis B. Coleman Center, I saw Looking for Langston for the first time on a 16 millimeter and thought to myself, wow, niggas really do just be gay. A simple revelation brought forth by an extraordinary piece of work. Looking for Langston isn't just queer, Black, surrealist, experimental, or interdisciplinary cinema. It's a whole other reality. From its opening scene that pays tribute to the deaths of Black queer artists throughout the diaspora, to the Harlem Renaissance and its conversation of Black art and queerness in the past, to the dark days of the HIV/AIDS crisis, and the autonomous speakeasy that weaves and bobs through space and time, Isaac Julien curates an alternative timeline where giants walk amongst their lost and scattered children of the past and future. The omnipotent angels who hold pictures of Langston Hughes and James Baldwin mixing with the words and voices of Essex Hemphill and Stuart Hall blurs linearity and does more than just queer the film's form and practice. It quares it and records and rewrites history itself. I saw my future in this film, and I want you to get a glimmer of yours when you see it.
As well as doing more justice to Looking for Langston's importance than I could, we open with this introduction because Rico flags an important word, quare, which, as some of you already know, I have tattooed right across my throat. Quare, Q-U-A-R-E, was put forward by E. Patrick Johnson, the fairy godfather of Black queer studies, in his 2001 essay, Queer Studies, or Almost Everything I Know About Queer Studies I Learned from My Grandmother. Part of what animates Johnson's theoretical intervention is an understanding that Black queer people, and the non-queer people who birth, nurture, and raise us, often have much more to offer the world than we're given credit for. It is a queerness that energizes my own cultural and intellectual inquiry, and which brings me and Rico together, both as friends and conversation partners. Rico Norwood is an American film and video game researcher out of the University of Southampton, who currently resides in London and Berlin. Their primary academic concerns are Black queer art and historical narratives through films, as well as video game studies with regards to race, gender, sexuality, and their development. Today we explore Looking for Langston's ongoing importance, the role cultural institutions like the BFI play in either gatekeeping or providing access to our queer cultural canons, and how politics of respectability and representation continue to hinder our collective cultural memory. And together we attempt to answer an enduring question, one addressed often on Busy Being Black. How do we ensure that work that could be so important to our liberation isn't so continually withheld from us? I'm Josh Rivers, and I'm busy being Black with Rico Norwood at the British Film Institute. Thank you for being here, Rico.
Thank you for having me.
We are going to talk about Looking for Langston, or rather utilize Looking for Langston. But first, how's your heart?
Oh, that shit is heavy. I think that this is such a very tumultuous time for various people occupying various spaces. My heart is very fucking heavy, but it's very, very... It's not being held alone. Multiple people are holding it up for me. They are in the audience, some of them. I see their faces. And some of them are abroad, but it's not that heavy with people. Yeah, so I'm good.
Someone asked me how I was doing the other day, and I was like, you know what? I'm just okay. And like, that's enough. You know, like I think I've kind of resisted more, or become more comfortable with not always feeling like I'm going to burst with excitement.
Damn, can I get to that level?
I don't know how I do it. I actually think it's just Chardonnay, but, you know, Well, let's unpack that in a different conversation. But when you said that your heart is being held, I thought of the desire, or of desire more broadly, but certainly the desire that a film like Looking for Langston explores. And I wonder if that might be a nice segue into this conversation about art representation, but I want to cement it in something more tangible, right? In the audience, if it's your first time seeing Looking for Langston, raise your hand.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. For listeners, everyone. So that's fantastic. And I cannot wait to hear what you all think of Looking for Langston. Right. For those of us who've just seen Looking for Langston for the first time, and indeed people who will be listening who haven't seen it at all, how would you describe the ultimate essence of Looking for Langston?
A manifestation of desire, but desire that's specifically catered to, created for, and looked upon by Black queer subjects in that moment in time. And I always tell people or preface the film with also mentioning other films, but specifically Tongues Untied and Marlon Riggs's, which we couldn't show here tonight as well, because you can't say one without the other. Mm-hmm. That's the way that I look at them. And you can't discover one without the other because they're two different sides of that coin. And I always tell people where Julien deals with the desire and the fantasy of Black queer life, Marlon Riggs comes with the reality. And like, I know, child.
That is such a great way to bifurcate those pieces of work.
It took me a long time to get to a place of understanding why that was, too, because you see how it's all jazzy and shit with, like very surrealist, very, very flowy. Marlon Riggs shit ain't like that.
Yeah. Have you seen Marlon Riggs' work, any of you? So Marlon Riggs is a very visceral approach to Black queer bodies and lives, but not just among other queer Black bodies and lives, but in the wider world, right? He confronts very beautifully, but difficultly, I suppose you'd say, the kind of cannibalization of Black bodies. He confronted the kind of existential nature of living with HIV and knowing that he was going to die. So I've never thought about understanding their work together that way, as Isaac Julien's almost an Afrofabulation. Right?
So historical context and understanding, Looking for Langston, the Harlem Renaissance, the New Negro movement, all these things as well too. The African American migration before the 20s, in terms of like production methods going into the East Coast and urban parts of like America drives a large body of Black populations to these places. So the Harlem Renaissance is a byproduct of the African American migration, in which like people are moving there, new people are coming to communities, they're having job prosperities. But parallel or concurrently, art is also being created in this time. And then so this is a capsule or like a zeitgeist for a lot of people to point in like African American history, but like diasporic history of Black art, queerness. Well, not even queerness, take that away. Because before it's very straight washed.
You mean the Harlem Renaissance?
The Harlem Renaissance, yes. So I can even tell you when I was in middle school learning about the Harlem Renaissance, and it was one of the straightest moments in history that they like regurgitate to us.
Yes.
They talk about Langston Hughes, they talk about other jazz artists, they talk about Alan Locke and all that, but none of Fire comes up, like nothing of like the context of what it was and things like that. Context for Looking for Langston, but it takes that point in time and uses it as a conduit for a larger encompassing conversation. So you can even go back to some of Isaac Julien's recordings on it, and he'll say, like, I use this as a diasporic connection for, like, global Black art. I wasn't just talking about Langston Hughes' life. I wasn't just talking about America. I was talking about everything. Even, like, the Black Brighton experience, the Afro experience, like, globally, all these things that we can find, like, a mediation through. And, yeah, it was kind of like, I found it that night in New York. I didn't know any, like, that was back in, like, 14.
So your introduction to Looking for Langston was in 2014 in New York.
I had no idea about it, but a film critic put me onto it because he was in Isaac Julien's Badass Cinema documentary. And he's like, there's this person, Isaac Julien, I think you should watch it. And I literally was in there drinking coffee in that 16 millimeter film, getting high off life. Like, I don't know what the fuck I was watching. Like, I literally was in a room like this by myself. And I could just always remember the reel flickering away, not knowing what I was exploring. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, niggas is gay. Like, that's literally what you meant. Like, you wasn't here. I was like, niggas be gay, bro. Niggas is gay. I was like, wow. Niggas can really just be gay. And like, you know, like, and obviously that doesn't make sense when I say it to y'all. But coming from some of y'all. But to know what the possibility of one's life could be through a piece of art is a very, very profound moment that I think everybody has in their life. But you just don't know it when you have it, or you're very, very aware of when you have it. Yeah. And that shit took me away.
It probably speaks to the rarity, right, of representation, which is not to say that there isn't a great deal of representation. Rather that our encounter with it can be quite rare, right? Because I think we always have to be careful when we're looking back and to the side and to forward, you know, if we're going to be looking rhizomatically, to quote Jafari Allen, that we're not obscuring and erasing all of the people who are not as well known as Isaac Julien, but who have offered and contributed and put forward their version of that contribution, which to culture, which is sometimes just walking down the street. So we're confronting ourselves and finding ourselves among people like us and people not like us and pieces of art. I remember seeing Looking for Langston for the first time and being like, that's what's like in my head. It's just dreamy and soft and everybody's pretty, you know?
Very, very mystical, surrealist.
Yeah, like my Mercury's in Pisces. So I saw this and I was like, wow, that is exactly what I want.
Like, how you see that on drugs? Like, what does that feel like? I wish I could like experience that the first time.
Yeah.
Like, wow, high all right. Like, what am I watching? But I was very sober when I watched this. I was like, oh, okay, this is great.
We're probably going a little off piece. Here's a burning question I have. Looking for Langston is a transcendent, trenchant, beautiful offering that can reflect us back to ourselves. And what does it say about who has access to what, that Looking for Langston isn't more widely available, or that we can only see it in kind of rarefied opportunities such as these?
Like being held by the BFI, yeah. Parts of it. Cultural institutions acting as gatekeepers to archival material, but not also archival material, but just art and culture in general, isn't just like a partial BFI thing. It's a global type of phenomenon. If you go to Brooklyn, the BAM, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, it's a cultural hub and center as well too, but they hold on to like a lot of archival pieces that are prominent and dedicated to like the Black culture and community around it. Oh, take that shit away. Go to the goddamn Harlem Center. I cannot think of the name of it. It just slipped me away. Literally guarding pieces of like voguing history or like Black queer history in general. And the accessibility is so high to get into there. It's astounding what people could see if they actually get through the trenches to access it. I think the BFI does do a good job in many ways, but I also think it can do much, much better jobs of like making like things like this, even though you can see Looking for Langston anywhere. But in London, you actually can. And like, that's the crazy thing about it. It's like, the accessibility of the film, it's just not widely available.
Yeah,
it was in the Tate for a permanent installation for a while.
But I think that's the point, right? Is that there is this beautiful work that is behind these gates. How do we bring down those gates?
I think that there are people who kind of like mediate that for like outside world. Like, not that we're any different, but I think there are a lot of people who mediate it for it. Like, there are a lot of things in film history. There are a lot of films didn't catch traction until like a couple people like mediated for them or kind of like bolstered them even more.
Right.
even like talking about Looking for Langston, how we break that down, its initial release and reception was not widely loved. One woman in like the LA Times said it was all flair and no substance.
Right.
Like, it was like, she was like, oh no, it just looks good, but they don't do anything. And there were a lot of legal cases with Langston Hughes' estate when it came out as well too. So even the initial, I wouldn't even say like, oh, we just come out with new films to make them accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
They're like gatekeepers.
Multiple.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
because like the BFI like or institutions are one thing, but the white critics and audiences also kind of like push things back as well too.
Yeah.
And so I think to make them accessible or to get those barriers down to answer the question, it's about the right people seeing them and then bringing them to like wider audiences or worlds and things like that as well.
And it feels like there's a great deal of work. I mean, we have to shout out Topher Campbell, who with Ajamu created the Rukus archive, which is housed at the London Metropolitan Archives and is the largest archive of queer Black art in Europe.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not as widely known as it ought to be.
Ajamu X.
Either. Ajamu X, an incredible photographer and artist. Do you see it as part of? This is a leading question. Sorry.
Okay.
What do you see as your role in helping disseminate more of the queer Black culture that has invigorated and animated your own sense of identity and belonging?
As an academic, a researcher, and an archivist, which I also do on the side as well, on top of the video game research and freelance writing, preservation is like a motif that goes throughout all of those things, but preservation and also presentation of them as well too. So if you notice when the credits went on, Oscar Michaud's name is there. Does anybody know who Oscar Michaud is? Bam, in the back. Thank you.
I don't.
Oh, shit. Oscar Michaud is clouded as the first feature-length Black filmmaker in America, maybe also in the world. Within Our Gates comes out in 1925 and is a response to Birth of a Nation in many, many ways in 1915, D.W. Griffin's, like very, very racist, 3-hour long propaganda.
Yes.
Child, it's a lot, yeah.
The world as it is, actually.
Yeah. So this whole thing of the preservation of those things, in my job as an archivist or a researcher too, is to extrapolate these like cultural like icons and then disseminate that knowledge or my mediation of that knowledge to like a wider audience. So I don't just talk about Looking for Langston or Oscar Michaud's in my PhD thesis. I talk about what they mean to other people and what they mean in a cultural context and what they could mean if people had access to them.
The phrase that's popping around in my head is cultural memory.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm having conversations on the show and among friends about like a reckoning and a remembering, and a rememory is even a word that someone has brought up. I've spoken to archivists and conservationists from the Wind who are preserving and documenting family genealogies from the Windrush generation, to Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley, who's just shown her work at the Serpentine. There's this kind of thread running through your work. There's this preservation and presentation, and through their work is this what they're calling archiving and documenting. It's all of the same kind of cultural memory making.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, because cultural memory making is an ongoing thing that goes on, and to be honest, like I think a lot of the ways that we record history, it gets redone over and over and over. Like the type of like revitalization of the Harlem Renaissance started kind of like in the 70s and went on afterwards, but like largely before that, it was a very, very straight washed event. It was Black, but it was very, very straight washed. And I think what really, that whole thing of like cultural memory, is like a very, very ongoing process of extrapolating lots of things, especially marginalized identities who are able to extract those things and see it from another light.
Yeah.
Like the side job that I have as a Black archivist in Southampton, if you've ever been to Southampton, Southampton is white as hell. Like it's white. Like
I love that you were like, that one, I'm going to go there.
That white. And so we've been doing the project for like a long time, and I complain to my friends who are in the audience about it all the time as well too. It's a great job, but it's just very, very painstakingly done, because you'll go through newspapers in like 1891, and it will be Black people not being able to get on, the sailors refusing to sail because of Negroes were like
a part of the crew.
Yeah.
And it's like, in my mind, I was like, how many white people have seen this? Like, who has read this? Who has regurgitated? Who has told people about this? And I know in Southampton, for nobody.
We don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because there's like the national cultural memory, which, as we know in Britain, is a work of art, actually.
Shit, a Picasso.
It's beautiful in its delusion. But, so there's like the kind of national/nationalist cultural memory. And then there's the cultural memory of communities like the queer Black communities, always plural, right? And so you've got the archivists. I guess I'm trying to map it out, right?
No,
so
that makes
bear with
sense.
me, y'all. But we've got like the preservationists, the archivists, and then we've got the people from outside these institutions and the kind of legible art spaces, right?
Yeah.
That creates and maintains and uplifts and gatekeeps things like Looking for Langston. But I'm curious about how the people outside then inform a cultural memory. Like, are we understanding in new and more nuanced ways, or more capacious ways even, how much of our collective understanding of ourselves as a community is informed by what happens outside of walls like these?
It's so difficult. Oh, yeah. Because it's like a game like a game of telephone, in terms of like people telling us a regurgitated past, but nobody's going there to check the initial message. Like, those people outside the boundaries, they just get the beginning of the message, and it takes somebody from outside the boundaries to infiltrate, go in there, and then say like, oh no, that shit didn't happen.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's not the way that I saw it. That's not the way that I read it. That's not the way that I remember it as well too. Even we don't even have to go back to older memories. Think of Stonewall in 1969.
Listen, we want to talk about fiction.
It's there's a portion in my thesis or my PhD where I say there's all these concurrent stories and these myths, legends, and facts about Stonewall, but literally people construct so much of their memory on this singular event at this time. What people forget that so much shit happened before, during, and after it. Right? So you talk about there was a New York Times piece where they got there, and it was the anniversary. It was I think right after the Post shooting, and they had some people who were at Stonewall, and they were saying I just don't remember all those Black queer people there. I don't remember trans people being there. I just don't remember it. I was I saw it, but I don't remember it. And then they countered with artists saying, well, just these people are harbingers. It doesn't matter if they weren't there or not. These people represent so much more even before the stuff was happening, during it, and after. Marsha P. Johnson, there's different interviews where they say oh, I got there kind of late, or I got there, oh no, I was there, conflicting stories as well too. But the whole crux of it all is this fixation on this very, very westernized rising up to take down the establishment bullshit, regurgitated by that Stonewall film that came out in 2014 by the dude who did goddamn Pacific Blue and Independence Day.
No, do you remember the poster of the young white man fighting for rights? And there was a collective global you gotta be kidding me, come on.
This is what it comes to. And those people on the outside who don't have access to the material, the stories, the personal stories, or even just the experience of being around and hearing perspectives about them. It can just fumble so much shit up.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we are it's twofold, or symbiotic rather. There needs to be an invitation of the outside in to the kind of official cultural memory, to the access of that, right? Here's how we verify in the institutional ways that verification is necessary. Here's how we verify your lived experience and your culture's history, but also what can you bring to that, right? Because I imagine there are so many people who have photos and stories and poems and things they've collected and little minutiae that they've gathered over the course of a life that could help contextualize history in a beautiful way.
And that verification is bullshit, because the verification mostly
Tell it.
The verification mostly is accommodated by very, very harsh institutions, very, very white-led institutions, and very much institutions that have a history of violence towards the people that they're trying to remediate the history to. Like, you shouldn't think that I'm an authority because I have a PhD and shit. My father knows cars better than anybody else, but he doesn't have a PhD. It's social knowledge, it's social expertise. And these people have just as much authority to tell these stories as those do. My nigga.
My nigga. That's right.
These people have just as much authority to tell these stories. In my research job for like the video game one, it's this whole thing of like marginalized identities in video gaming and stories for them and stuff like that as well too. So in the research processes of going through and saying like, how do we define this? How do we talk about this? People kept going to like experts and PhD people and stuff like that in the academy. And at one point we was like, why the fuck do we have to go to these people to establish or legitimize knowledge outside of those realms? Like that knowledge is just as valid, or if not more valid, than the knowledge in these like ivory institutions.
The BFI Rubin Library at BFI Southbank is available to everyone, free of charge. It contains a huge collection of books, journals, and digitized material about the world of film, television, and the moving image. Their priority is comprehensive coverage of the UK, but the collection is international. Busy Being Black returns in just a moment. I'm Josh Rivers, and you're listening to Busy Being Black. Today, a conversation with Rico Norwood on the enduring importance of Isaac Julien's Looking for Langston, recorded live as part of BFI Flair. Fun fact. I always have loads of fun facts. Queer Black Studies, like in the academy, was inaugurated by the essay that E. Patrick Johnson wrote in 2000. Queer studies are everything I know about queer studies I learned from my grandmother. Quare, I have it on my neck. And an essential part of that and of queer Black studies is that queer Black theory and radical queer Black theory is that we have to take knowledge from the ivory tower to the front porch is what E. Patrick Johnson said. Like, does this make sense to my grandmother? If it doesn't, throw it out, right? Like it has to be relevant to her life and has to make sense. And so then there's this other kind of, I guess, drive emerging in the academy and beyond, right? Like, how are we using the access we have to places like the BFI, to the academy, to podcast platforms, to art galleries, to like, do you call it remediating? Like, disseminating what's there.
Like, it's just
because
so
it just
much.
can't be contained here.
It's like,
I mean, it is, but it shouldn't be.
I think about in times where I've integrated or not integrated, snuck into the academy. And like, I was teaching a lecture in Southampton. Zora Hurst Nelson's Their Eyes Was Watching God was a part of the reading. They read it, and I read the papers, and the person who wrote the paper said, this book taught me that Black people are lazy, and that this was like last 2 years ago, like 2 years ago before the pandemic. He told me that black people are lazy and that they'll get over you at any chance that they get. This is like a second, third year university student. I read that fucking paper. I was like, yo.
Do you mean white people? Yeah.
I read the paper and I thought nobody like me has ever been here.
Right.
Nobody like me has ever talked to these kids. Nobody like me has ever like, my nigga, what? Like, like nobody has never like
challenged that
thought. And so I read the paper, went to my supervisor, the person who sits over the module. I was like, yo, you need to read this. And she read it like, oh, yeah, it's a bad paper. I was like, no. You need to read this.
The content is important.
And she said, oh. She was like, how would you, and I really like that she did this. Her name is Shelly. Shelly actually did the BFI's women's in the industry here. Yeah, shout out to Shelly. Shelly's telling me, what do you want? How do you want to do this? Like, how do you want? Shelly didn't take the will, like, I'll take care of this. She was like, no. How do you want to go about doing this? I'm like, let me talk to him.
Yeah.
And when you say, like, how do we get that out? It's not like saying like, oh, I got it out. No, I think it's if more people like me were allowed into those spaces, this wouldn't have been a problem.
Right.
And it possibly could have been a problem, but also it's just like if more people like who don't fit the hegemonic idea of those places are let into those places, then the knowledge is challenged and it's not happening in a vacuum anymore. And then it's like, oh no, I can't say black people are lazy after reading like the first intro from Zoroaster Nelson's book, Their Eyes Was Watching God. Like,
Are we talking about the same book? It is a big piece of fiction, isn't it?
like that's literally what happens inside those institutions like that.
Yeah.
If they don't talk or, and it's sad to say, allow people in, like they're the power structures, but also I'm a firm believer that I can't rely on power structures to fully represent who I am or help me survive.
They're not meant to.
So you just build your own on the outside of it and then just give those to the people around you in your community.
I love that.
Yeah, like I think that's a way that you counteract it rather than us breaking into breaking into the BFI, breaking into the Tate, it's like smash it, like breaking
not
into,
this BFI.
not this BFI, not tonight. No. Rather than trying to constantly chip away at systems of oppression that have always excluded marginalized identities, you say fuck that shit, you build your own. And then you include other people who have also been kept on the outside to those spaces. I know it sounds very, very vague, but in practice.
It doesn't.
You know.
Because what we're saying then, because there's two things that come up in my mind as a result of what you're saying. The first is that just as in this kind of like micro interaction that you had, which is bigger than micro, but you get what I mean. Like this micro interaction you had at Southampton University with this student, that's similar to, in the same vein of the kind of censored images that come out or that are delivered through cultural institutions like the BFI, right? Because if you think about what it takes to make it into the Tate, right? Or MoMA, right? So by the time a piece of art that a black queer person has created that is naturally held to an exceedingly different standard, we've all been to an art gallery, you know, like, so we're kind of already seeing this at once really rarefied example of what black queer art can be. We're also seeing mass media deliver kind of abject violence back to us against black bodies. And so I think it can be quite disorienting to navigate life as a queer black person or black person more broadly, and to have access to images, culture that might prove healing. So the building of these spaces outside of, to follow this long thought through, provides that space, right? It provides a rejection of the hegemonic institution and says we can build this ourselves. I love that.
Yeah, because literally, like, people, when they think of black queer cinema, Moonlight is, Jesus, Moonlight is like the first, I know, y'all, Moonlight is really, really straight washed. Like, it's really, really straight washed.
It's a type, but this is what happens, right? Moonlight became someone asked me, because you know, you grew up in Houston, I grew up in Atlanta. They were like, was that what it's like for you? I was like,
the cocoa butter budget is so high in like, Moonlight.
I am quite clearly from the suburbs.
Like, black people are so glossy in it. And I was just like, I've never seen black people that shiny before in real life. And I was like, the color grading must be like incredible.
It was beautiful.
But the tableau, and the thing about it, I always tell people, looking for Langston had to crawl so Moonlight could run. Yeah,
because they're, Moonlight and Looking for Langston are in the Venn diagram as a circle.
Yeah, and it's just like...
I mean, it's a different type of fantasy, right? But it is a fantasy nonetheless, or a fabulation is probably more accurate.
Yeah, and it's just like, Looking for Langston was doing, like, the most tangible example of it is if you've seen Moonlight, and at the end of Moonlight, they just hold each other and kiss, and it just fades to black. And I was like, what the fuck?
Should have fucked. We should have...
What? Clap on that. They should have fucked.
They should have fucked.
And
we were robbed. We were robbed. We'll never get over it.
And I remember being in New York, hearing about Moonlight, going to see Moonlight, and like, oh, everybody's talking about Moonlight. Oh, Moonlight. I was like, okay, let me go see it. And when it ended, I was like, that's it?
Yeah.
Like, they not gonna fuck? Like, you know, like, I think it's so dangerous to see black men fucking, like, you know, literally naked embracing one another, not no artful like fade into the, and you just like imagine, oh, he must be the top. The other one must be the, Looking for Langston, you literally see body parts. And Ajamu X does this thing where he like, the archive is the body. It's not like an establishment that you go into. It's not like this place that you download. It's literally the body. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing history through bodies on screen. And all the advancements we've made, all that we claim that we made, all these things that we claim that we did, we still can't see two black men fucking on mainstream cinema. Like, we just can't see it. And that boggles me so much. Like, why is that so dangerous, why is that so hard for people to, like, see?
Joseph Beam said black men loving black men is a revolutionary act, right?
Yeah.
We might say it's destructive, right, to the dominant order, right? Because if you see two black men fucking, and, we're saying fucking, but that could be any type of sexual engagement.
You've seen people fucking films before.
Yeah, but I think what I'm trying to get at is that to do that, what's lost in the absence of fucking in Moonlight is the kind of interiority that they tried so hard to come across, right? That thoughtful, meditative, contemplative, like, refusal to speak almost, right? That animates the silence. Thank you. That's obviously silence. That kind of animates that movie is really important. But the importance of that, I think, is lost because we were robbed of that moment when that silence could have been broken.
And you can just see niggas fucking. Like, it's like, that's such a simple.
And we could have seen two guys.
You can see niggas fucking. Like, and that's just like, it's very, very much in this anthropological type of, like, the way that white people did jazz. Like, it's very, ooh. Like, when you go to Ronnie Scott's and you see, like, this silhouette, say, like, ooh.
It's very clean.
Jazz. It's like, I never paid for a jazz show in my life. Jazz was always on the corner on Frenchman in New Orleans, like, of somebody, like, literally playing, and we just all out there, like.
Yeah, can we also note the pronunciation of New Orleans? Sorry. It really bothers me.
Like, literally, it's like it's that in Moonlight is this like very, very anthropological look into like another world from like, and we can't even blame white people all on this one. Barry Jenkins kind of did that up as well too, the adaptation of the play. And, like, I think when I saw it, I was like, no, it's an important film, but you can understand that they got to that part and like they can't fuck on screen.
Do you think that we demand more as queer black people from queer black creators because of the rarity of it? Because as you were talking, I was thinking about all the other pieces in the cultural canon, like, and not the black one, just the larger cultural canon that we consider important, and they're not all amazing, right? Not each one does everything.
Yeah.
Do we demand more from the queer black art that's put into public spaces because we know how hard it is to get? Think of the concessions that Barry Jenkins will have had to have made in order to get Moonlight into theaters, right? Like, I imagine there was many structural barriers and concessions he had to make, but yet we're looking at this as queer black people thinking this could have been so much more, The
reality of production, both in a film sense and outside of production, in any type of like media that one creates or art that one creates, goes through like a filtration system where sacrifices have to be made, deals have to be cut, and things like that as well too. I expect that from the first film. But the second one, homie.
Okay, fair.
You got a whole Oscar on your belt. You can do, like, Beyonce had to do a whole bunch of stuff with Destiny's Child in the beginning. Denim fits and everything.
I remember.
Ladies, leave your man at home.
Yeah, I remember.
She think we forget about ladies, leave your man at home, but we don't forget that.
Never forgot that.
Yeah. She had to do a lot of stuff. But when she got to a point of like, okay, I'm the shit, I can do what I want to do. Like, and like Lemonade and stuff like that, like arguably like Bell Hooks went in Lemonade and like all that type of stuff. But it was a very, very robust piece of work opposed to everything that came before. Because,
Yeah.
The filtration system that is there had to go through it.
And so maybe part of the solution, I'm aware that we need to draw to a close, but maybe part of the solution, tell me if you think this is an appropriate attempt at a solution, is that we should hopefully be able to or get better at recognizing what's missing so that we might help also fill in those gaps.
Oh.
Right? If we can understand how what Moonlight is and what the beauty it does offer, and its relationship to Looking for Langston, and that relationship to Marlon Riggs, and that relationship to Joseph Beam and Essex Hemphill, and
like
and Melvin Dixon
puzzle.
And Asado Saint, and that generation of the long 1980s, as Professor Allen would call it. Like, if we can understand, maybe this is part of the cultural memory piece, right? That it's not all here, and it's not all going to be here, but hopefully if all of us contribute, we can get it there.
Pieces of the puzzle, if we all put them together and understand that Looking for Langston is a part of a bigger pie of art and representation that deals with like marginalized identities in general, I think that that's how a tangible solution could be put part of it. Don't show Moonlight, show Looking for Langston, Moonlight, Tongues Untied, all these things to show like there's a rich history of this already going on.
To close, I normally ask all of my guests, what do you hope for? But I'm going to ask you a different question. There will be young Black queer kids all around the world who are who will be looking for themselves and won't know exactly where to look, right? They might come up against erasure or violence or a void.
Yeah.
Where have you found yourself and your people?
I found my people through various places, various states, various like locations, various pieces of art, various like memories, various events. I found my people in Looking for Langston. I found my people in Fusion's nightclub that has burned down in New Orleans. I found my people in people who are no longer here with me, like James. Not the James, he's here. That James is here.
Hi, James.
But another friend of mine, James, who died. I found my people through like moments in my life. And I can only hope that I leave breadcrumbs the way that Isaac Julien left for me, and like how Langston Hughes left for him, and how like the people before them left them for, so people can follow those same breadcrumbs like I did and find some sense of self in a world that literally allows you to not construct your own. That's it. Nothing beautiful.
That was beautiful. That was really beautiful. Rico Norwood.
That was beautiful.
Rico Norwood is an American film and video game researcher out of the University of Southampton who currently resides in London and Berlin. They hail from Houston, but received their undergraduate degree in mass communications from Xavier University of New Orleans and their MA in media studies at Long Island University's Brooklyn campus. Their primary academic concerns are Black queer art and historical narratives through films, as well as video game studies with regards to race, gender, sexuality, and their development. I'd like to extend a special thank you to Katie Reddington at the BFI for her encouragement, enthusiasm, and energy. Busy Being Black is the podcast exploring how we live in the fullness of our queer Black lives. Your support of Busy Being Black means the world. Please do rate and review the show and tell others. The more you do, the more people like us get to hear the stories and voices amplified here. And finally, thank you to my friend and co-conspirator Lazarus Lynch, a musician and culinary extraordinaire based in New York City, for creating Busy Being Black's triumphant and ancestral theme music.
I'm so